2. All right, I think we're live.
Oh,
Yeah.
talking to me? All right, I'm sorry. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Rob Tebow, Director of the Hunt College Union, and welcome to 3 Things I Learned About Social Media and Technology. Our program, 3 Things I Learned, is all about bringing employees and alumni together and students to talk about the fun stuff, the profound stuff, the silly stuff, but in the end, it's about having conversations. So tonight, this is about having conversations with our panelists, whom you're going to meet in a few minutes, with members of the audience, and with myself at times. I'm excited to be here. Let me turn it over to my co-host, Dr. Monica Grau.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to introduce our fabulous panelists tonight. We have Kyle Beckley, who's a SUNY Oneonta graduate, class of 2008. He's the co-founder of Full Out Creative in New York City. As a former Oneonta Alumni Association board member, and also is a proud graduate of our theater department. He is a U.S. Army veteran, having completed his service as lead intelligence analyst and personnel security manager for 2,100 soldiers. He's currently pursuing his executive master's degree in public administration and serves as a delegate and legislative committee member for the Enlisted Association of the National Guard of the United States. Jessica Reynolds is a writer, editor in SUNY Oneonta's Office of Communication and Marketing. The coolest part of her job is managing and creating content for the college's social media accounts. After graduating from SUNY Oneonta with a degree in mass communication in 2012, she worked for 4 years as a newspaper reporter and editor of a quarterly music and arts magazine. She is passionate about Netflix crime documentaries and poodles, and would also love to someday author a book. Alice began working with the Downtown Committee of Syracuse Incorporated in January 2015. As the Director of Communications, she is the voice of the Downtown Committee, handling all internal and external communications to promote businesses, retailers, restaurants, employers, and residents that are driving the revitalization throughout downtown Syracuse. In addition to her work at the Downtown Committee, Alice is a public relations consultant for Strategic Communications LLC based in Syracuse. Prior to her work at the Downtown Committee and Strategic Communication, Alice worked as a news producer at CNY Central, NBC3, CBS 5, and CW6 in Syracuse, where her work was nominated for an Emmy Award for a mid-sized television news market, and was a news producer and reporter at WBNG TV in Johnson City. Alice graduated from SUNY Oneonta with a Bachelor of Science degree in Mass Communications, Concentration Production, and a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Studies in 2010. She is proud to be able to use both degrees in her daily work, and she currently serves as the Vice President of the Oneonta Alumni Association Board of Directors. I'm going to invite Alice to talk to us about her 3 things she's learned first.
Thank you so much, Monica, and thank you, Rob, for organizing this, and thank you to Jared for making sure everything is running well technologically. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm so excited to hear what Jessica and Kyle have to share as well. But I figured what better way to start than with a technology fail. So my first job out of college was producing the news for WBNG TV in Binghamton, the CBS affiliate, which I believe you can still get on the local Oneonta channels. And I also filled in there as a reporter. One of my assignments was profiling standout high school students from around the Southern Tier in Central New York that had received a specific scholarship reward. And for one of the interviews, I had to speak to a student who had attended Norwich High School. Norwich is about 45 minutes west of Oneonta in Shenango County. Its claim to fame is the Car Museum, if you are not familiar with it. It's also about an hour ride from Binghamton. So setting up this story took some coordination because my work day at the time started at 3 p.m. I worked what they call the night side shift, so I was done at about midnight. And of course, the school day typically ends around 4. So in order to make this interview happen, I had to come in a little bit early and drive up to Norwich, meet the student, meet their guidance counselor. And the way our equipment room was set up at the time, there was a bunch of cameras and all the gear that goes along with that, the microphones, the batteries, the tripods, the cases. And as you picked up the equipment to take it out, you physically had to sign it out each time, and then of course sign it back in when you brought it back. You'd plug in the battery so the next person would have charged equipment, et cetera, et cetera. So the piece of equipment that I had signed out had an indicator that had been signed out the previous evening. So in theory, that whole morning, that whole afternoon, it had not been used, and I had a nice green light for the battery. So I assume it's good to go. Needless to say, drove an hour, sat down for the interview, hit record. About 2 minutes into the conversation, I realized the camera is dead and not recording. So in theory, I'm piecing the puzzle pieces together in my brain, and I know that the issue must have been that nobody legally signed it out that day. But when you're on the job and you're in a professional setting, you can't really explain that to people you're just meeting for the first time, because that makes you look bad, that makes the organization look bad. So I apologized profusely, coordinated again to get the interview, and it all did really work out. It was just, in that moment, a really big inconvenience, and of course you feel slightly embarrassed. So from that day on, I always tested the backup battery to make sure that it was charged, and I taught myself lesson number 1, which is recharge, 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 and always bring a backup. So my second lesson learned is more of a hybrid of technology and social media. And I'll share another story with you from my news producing days. Maybe this will make you laugh, but you'll have to bear with me because it involves tragic news stories, unfortunately. So when I worked at CNY Central in Syracuse, the NBC affiliate, one of the first big national news stories that happened while I was there was the Colorado movie theater mass shooting in Aurora, Colorado. 13 people passed away. And in the news business, we're always trying to think of different angles and elements to explore as we tell stories, even the sad ones, because we want to give people a reason to watch our news and not the national network or not the competing news station in town. So we're figuring out how to present the information a little bit differently. And we realized that Aurora, Colorado, where this shooting had happened, was only about a half hour from Littleton, Colorado, where the Columbine shooting had taken place. So I requested that our graphics department make up a map that showcased the distance between Aurora and Littleton. The map makes it into the newscast. I think this was the 5 o'clock newscast. The graphic also aired at 6, again at 10, and again at 11, and the next morning. And then around 6 a.m. or so, somebody realizes that it is indeed a map showing the distance between Aurora and Littleton, but not in Colorado. As it turns out, there's also an Aurora and Littleton in the state of Indiana. And that is where the graphics department interpreted geography that I had requested, because I did not specify the state. So you might wonder how a mistake like that can happen, and it does fall under my jurisdiction of responsibility as the producer and the director, because they let that go to air. And of course we should have double checked the graphic and noticed it. But when you're in those sorts of positions, you're often writing things in live time, making decisions in live time. You're cueing reporters and photographers live in the field who are experiencing technical difficulties and delays. And then while the meteorologist is giving the weather report, you're talking to the anchors on set through their earpiece, making sure that they know that you just changed around the order of the show to be able to fit in the breaking news that just came in. So there's lots of moving pieces going on, and in this role, you really have to trust the other people and rely on them to also do their jobs. But this was a day that I realized sometimes you also have to think for other people too, and spell out what might seem obvious to you might not be as obvious to other people. And really what it comes down to is a good reminder to always double check things. Whether it's making sure you've requested the right graphic, spelled things correctly, put pictures in a PowerPoint presentation where they're supposed to go. it's so important just to be able to get a second pair of eyes on it. Whether you created the content or not, it's not personal. And sometimes if you did create it, you might be too close to see it objectively. And you see this all the time in newspapers or even in online articles. If you look carefully, you can tell where the writer puts a placeholder. My go-to placeholder in the writing I do today is to run out the letters XXX, YYY, ZZZ in all caps. So I know to go back and replace that thought. And sometimes when you're in a rush, it's easy to overlook that, and lo and behold, the thing gets published, XXX, YYY, ZZZ. I've seen that happen in news headlines, online. Luckily, in the digital world, it can get corrected quick enough. But as you all know, once something is out there, it never really goes away. There's always a way to find things. Imagine that living on in a screenshot, a retweet. It exists somewhere in the internet. Personally, I try to live by this motto: whatever you post to social media and whatever you're tagged in or photographed in, expect that people are going to see it. I don't want to be strict and say think twice before you post, because we all know what we should and shouldn't post online. But even the things that seem relatively innocent, like a group of colleagues getting together at a networking event, singing along to your favorite song at a concert, a review of a great meal you had, whatever you are linked to digitally, just expect to own it and plan to be asked about it, plan to have it come up in a future conversation. And the same goes for the world of dating apps too. Murphy's Law states that everything that can go wrong will, and there's got to be a law somewhere that says if you're on dating apps, you will in fact at one point meet someone in real life on accident whom you've either matched with or swiped past online. And while I've been retired from dating apps, I joke about this because I don't like them, for a couple of years now, I had an experience where I had matched with someone who worked out at the gym that I go to. And I'm in a little bit of a unique position because the gym I go to is also right across the street from where I work. And part of my job is to promote all of the small businesses in downtown Syracuse and support them. So I consider the gym sort of professional turf because I've been in meetings with the owner, I know the staff, we have work-related conversations. So anyway, this potential match recognized me, and I didn't recognize them, and come to find out they had asked the gym staff about me. And I didn't really like that, but when you stop and think about it, the person didn't do anything wrong, because of course you'd ask mutual connections about someone that you're potentially interested in. But it just felt a little too close to home for my comfort level with the blending of too many worlds, if that makes sense. So I share that story to help illustrate the ways that social media, while it is an incredibly powerful tool, it also shines windows into aspects of our lives that we might think are private. And social media helps us keep tabs on people. Someone always knows what we're up to, even when we don't think that we're actively showing them. So those are my 3 lessons.
Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like the last 3 minutes I should remind my teenage daughters about the use of social media. Remind them that. Thank you, Alice.
Jess.
Okay, so my first lesson or thing that I learned from social media is that people like to talk about themselves. And that may seem like I'm being negative or like that's a bad thing. I'm saying that people are like selfish, but it's really not. When in doubt, ask people a question about themselves. And I sort of learned this from experimenting with different captions, especially on Oneonta's Instagram. People love answering questions about themselves. If you phrase the caption like, tell us what your major is, or even as something as simple as, what percentage battery do you have on your phone? They just like answering questions about themselves. And I found the same thing to be true on my personal social media accounts. Just asking a silly question on my Facebook to start a conversation. Like, do you use hot or cold water to brush your teeth? People get heated in these debates. They like to talk about it. And so I think that really just goes back to every one of us just wanting to kind of be seen and heard. I mean, if you think about it, when you're a little kid, what's the first thing that children talk about? It's, what's your favorite color? And how old are you? So we kind of like train people from a young age, I feel like, to answer questions about themselves. So this is a lesson that I've learned in social media, and of course, we know analytics-wise, the more comments a post has, the better it will perform as far as the algorithm. And so that's a trick, you know, to make a post perform well, but it's also kind of a life lesson if you're wanting to make conversation with someone that I've learned. Ask them about themselves. So that was my first one. My second thing that I've learned from social media is to really know your brand and know thyself. And if you don't really have a strong grasp of your brand, listen to your audience, because they will help you identify your brand. So for instance, when you think of SUNY Oneonta, obviously we're a college and you come here to get a good quality, affordable education. But what are the things you're going to remember about Oneonta in 20 years? It's probably more the relationships that you make here and the traditions. So our brand is more pass through the pillars, the color red, our mascot red, cold cheese pizza, buffalo chicken wrap from Mills, all of those little things that people remember. And I think when you have a strong sense of your brand, it's easier to make content that will resonate with your audience. So that was my second thing. Third thing would be, if it makes sense, try to jump on the bandwagon every once in a while. I'm sure we all remember the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. I feel like that was one of the first things on social media that really went viral. Everyone was doing it, from your aunt to Beyonce, like celebrities. And then I also was thinking about, do you remember the dress where we were arguing about different people saw different colors? Was it blue and gold, or was it black and whatever the other option was? People just love that type of stuff. And if you can find a way to hop on the bandwagon without it feeling inauthentic or cringy, if you can put a spin on it and make it, like for us, Oneonta, when Drake's song In My Feelings came out and it was huge, people were doing a dance to it. I think it was like the In My Feelings challenge. We had Red the mascot dance in front of a pretty view, and it's just fun things like that to try and hop on board these trends. And yeah, I guess those are my three.
Great, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yes, I'm going to time myself. I don't want to go over. We have time limits, by the way. And I'm also going to talk to them out there because you're sitting right there. I can't not talk to you. But I framed my three things a little bit differently, because when we had our pre-meeting, I had asked Rob some specific questions, and he's like, just go with it, which is it's the real world. So I'm going to talk about a couple things that relate to technology and social media, but as always, I teach people and I do workshops and stuff, so I'm probably going to throw life lessons in there, which you can throw away, because you probably develop your own life lessons, but I'll share mine. So I'll start with the technology aspect of it. So I graduated from Oneonta. I'd worked in admissions, the call center, the Morris Conference Center. I did all of these things. We were class during the day, working off campus, going to shows, and I applied for a job here, and I got it. So I started working in the Office of Alumni Engagement. The role I was assigned to never existed before. So it was coordinator of electronic and social media. I think that was the title I had. So the website, their social media accounts, their email marketing campaigns. I had next to zero experience, and that job also never existed before here. And so there was no playbook. It was, you had to make it up from scratch. So that trend continued. The next job I went to, working for the SUNY Chancellor in New York City, that job never existed before. Leaving her place and going to Broadway Dance Center, the first job I had there never existed before. And so the whole moral of the story is, you cannot prepare for everything, so be prepared to be completely unprepared. That's okay. And that kind of goes into my first life lesson I wrote in my phone, which was, the enemy of good is better. I'm generally a perfectionist, but if you're always worried about doing your best work and you never put any work out there, you'll never have any work to show, so nobody knows. It's all in your mind, right? And that's not just with your professional work, it could be your social life. I want the perfect spouse, but you never get the perfect spouse because you never took the steps. You never let go of the perfectionism to appreciate kind of those building blocks. It can apply to today. For me, perfectionist, normally I would write like a script out and then I would riff off it, but I said, you know what, I'm just gonna write some notes and just talk. And some people, like you thought you would need notes, but you were great.
Thank you.
You just read it, went on. And Alice is a pro, so Alice and I served on the Alumni Association board together. So the enemy of good is better. It doesn't mean you can't do good work. It doesn't mean that Steve Jobs couldn't make perfect, at the time, devices, but there was a lot of failure and experimentation that got to that first iPhone and the Apple Watch and all of that. So the enemy of good is better. Alice talked about backup batteries. I cannot stress enough, A, how anxiety producing it is to go to a set, because I do production, I do small scale TV, film, and theatrical production in New York, and to have your batteries not charged or to not have the right memory cards. It is the most stressful thing in the world, so be prepared. That's a sidebar. So a little bit of a tip from the audience. When did Facebook start? What year was Facebook available to people? Just take a guess. 2007. We got one guess. Anybody else? It's The Price is Right. Early 2000s. Great. Well, it was 2004. And at the time, Facebook started, and it was Harvard and Stanford. And there were a total of 40 colleges that were part of the pilot for Facebook. Oneonta was one of those 40. So Facebook only used to be for college students and only those 40 colleges. So Oneonta, being one of the first, we were one of the experimental campuses for Facebook. Very different world back then. What does that mean? Well, we all started posting on Facebook in 2004 and 2005 and 2006 and 2011. We posted and posted and posted over all that time. Why does that matter? Because when people tell you stuff lives online forever, it is very, 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 very true. And that could mean what you think is fun now, down the line, great, keep the photos to yourself, but you really have to be careful with social media. I sound like I'm like generations older than you, but I'm not that much older than you. But you cannot stress enough, like you did, right? Alice did?
Yeah, Alice.
It's so important. You will be going for a job one day, and the ability for people to snoop onto social media is getting more and more powerful. Watch what you post. Don't have fights and arguments with people online. That stuff will come to haunt you. Luckily, I deleted my Facebook because I don't have one, and all that stuff is gone. And that's not because I had anything crazy on there, but depending on what you want to get involved with, you got to watch out for that. So that leads me to two last things. Your degree is not the determinant of your future. And I say that because at Oneonta, when they were redoing the mission statement, Grow, Thrive, Live, there was a huge discussion about whether to include community in it or not include community in it. I was on the community team. I was like, this has to be in there because, I'll just touch my mic, the community aspect of this college is probably your single biggest asset. You have your social life, you have your academic life. Both of them are extremely important, but the benefit of being here is that access, that networking. On the technology and social media front, how that relates, we have alumni that you've never heard of before, or I guess you've never heard of before. Did you know that we have someone who's still going into the International Space Station? We have an astronaut as an alum, Ron Guerin. Yep.
He was on the Today Show today.
He was on the Today Show
Yes, he
today
was.
talking about the first all-civilian flight into space. We have the most senior IBM executive at a time who was a woman. She retired as the most senior executive at IBM. That's amazing. Never knew about her till I worked in alumni affairs. And then in my industry, two of the biggest players, one of the top 5 Broadway producers is a grad and contributes to student and alumni programming. He's amazing, Hal Luftig. And Neil Mazzella, who owns and started, I think, one of the biggest production companies for like building sets and all that on Broadway. And so we have all these amazing alumni, all of these connections. Stay in touch. Connect with them on LinkedIn. You may not be using LinkedIn that much right now. for most of us, it's like you drop your resume stuff on there and that's it. But I will always look people up on LinkedIn before I reach out to them because I just want to check how they're presenting themselves. It says a lot about you that you care enough to just put it up there. You don't have to live on LinkedIn. You don't have to read the books that people are reviewing on there, but get your resume up there. It's a huge asset. And with that, I have less than 60 seconds. It's all Rob.
I love the way you did that. You had it well timed out and ready to go. I appreciate it. I liked your comments about perfection. And for me, I'm a fan of pursuing the art of perfect imperfection. So I just want to throw that out there. We have some questions. Monica and I will have some questions. We're going to pitch a few here in a moment. We will also invite you all to ask some questions to our panelists as well. So if you have something in mind, we'll reach out. Please jump in. We'd love to have you pitch a few questions to our friends. I think I'd like to actually start, you pointed out something that Ms. Reynolds had pointed out, and I just want to give a shout out to Teresa, her mom. Can you pitch that? Because I think it's nice how we can tie some content to student clubs and organizations. So if you'll hit that, please.
So, in fact, actually, all of you kind of touched on an aspect of this question in different ways. But my question is, how do student clubs who want to use social media, one, learn about their brand, two, stay appropriate, and three, really thrive in an online environment?
That's a good question.
And any of you can discuss.
Well, I think if you have, again, I think if you kind of talk to the people in your club and work together, I think one thing particularly about Instagram is, one tip is that graphics don't really perform well. So make sure you're taking pictures at your events that you hold or your meetings of all the fun stuff that you're doing. I think our club Instagrams have been doing a really good job this semester. I give them a lot of credit. They are not just throwing up a poster and expecting people to like that and engage with it, but showing like behind the scenes of what goes into making the club. And so I would say, you know, content is king. Make sure you're producing and offering up content that people will be interested in. And yeah, just, I guess that's the main thing I would say.
Alice, do you have anything?
Oh, thank you, Kyle. I would say seize the power of the throwback posts. People love those Throwback Thursdays. They're still a thing. People love that tag. And also, it's a way to grow the followers of the club. The alumni network is huge, and you might find you can connect with somebody who graduated 30 years before you just because they have such good memories of the club. For example, I was the managing editor of the State Times, and I personally would love to see archived issues that I worked on, not necessarily because I want the glory of seeing my name, but just to live vicariously through what's currently happening. And it'd be fun to see what the newspaper front page looked like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. There's so many great things in that State Times office. And that's content that's right in front of you waiting for you. So that would be kind of fun. And then, of course, you're in the IRC studios right now. The Wire Club has so much old film and whatnot. I think dating back, gosh, as far as, I think Dave Giese was showing me stuff that was from like the 50s and the 60s, and that's so much fun to go through. So seize the power of memories.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'll dip my toes in. With social media, sometimes I feel not condescending, but we're talking to a generation that social media is going to develop around you for your generation. You're going to bring it, then you're going to be like us. And you'll be like, when I was on TikTok, and then people are going to be like, what's TikTok? I'm on like Snapface 2.0. But from watching Facebook grow up from the beginning, and Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, now TikTok is kind of the major player for today, for now, you'll see. Networking is important there too, and by networking, I'm usually right now meaning tags and sharing. So I'll speak to Mask and Hammer. Mask and Hammer, oldest club on campus, if you didn't know. It was the first club on campus. It's the theater department's club. They share stuff that's important to them, and if I'm from the outside as a former student and alumni of that program, I want to see what shows they're doing. I want to see the behind the scenes stuff. for people who are not from that department, which is also a potential audience, what do they want to see? Well, they probably want to be pitched the cool things that you're doing. And some of those I'm also going to like, but some of those are more for a different audience. So it really depends. Why is someone looking at your account? Why do you think they should be looking at your account? So if you don't know why you're posting something, probably not going to work out too well. So you don't need to have a comprehensive outline, but why should people come to your account? Do you have a unique perspective? If you are a student, guaranteed you have a unique perspective, because everyone else that's watching your account that's not here can't see what you're seeing. So we want to see the changes, we want to see the growth. So don't ask for permission, don't ask for who will give you permission, ask who will stop you. Just do it.
I like it.
Yep.
I like it a lot. Some of your earlier comments about the early days of Facebook, I recall, I apologize, but I remember looking up candidates for student jobs at times, because at that point your Facebook, it's a social media resume. It was fair game as far as I was concerned back then. And I would find a couple things that I would question, and I hired people regardless, but I would pull them in and say, you know, I'm glad you're on my team, but you might want to rethink what you're posting. Because back then there was not as many controls, if I'm accurate,
Yeah.
right? So you couldn't control a lot of your content. It was whatever you put was out there.
You
correct?
could search people, and I hate to put it in these terms, but before Facebook locked down privacy, you could go on and say, search, 5 miles around me based on sexual orientation. You could, all the stuff that advertisers use, any user on Facebook could use. It's kind of scary when you think about it, but we're not there anymore.
It's
So
wild.
it's,
Look, I only have 671 followers on my Twitter handle.
That's
Okay.
pretty good,
Yeah.
Rob.
That's pretty good.
But
You're on
most
your
of them
way.
I think most of
That's
them are
great.
just dead accounts, but that's beside the point. How do you, what is a piece of advice you all might give someone, perhaps like me, who wants to build their social media persona? So, I want to build this thing. What's a piece of advice?
I don't want to talk on this. I just learned about these in depth from a specialist, but do you have any stats on video versus photo for social media propagation?
It depends on the channel. I mean,
Let's use Instagram.
Instagram.
That probably has the most cross-generational.
Yeah, so I think that Instagram was made to show photos. That's originally what it was for, and I think that in our data, photos still perform the best above videos. And now Instagram has introduced Reels, which is their attempt at competing with TikTok. It's not really working. So for a while, the algorithm was favoring Reels, and so we tried to do a couple of those, and they don't perform that well. I think you and the channels are always changing, but if you look and see what they started as, at least for Instagram, photos are still where it's at for us. Our top performing video was when students in the music industry program got to Zoom with John Mayer, and he made a little jingle about SUNY Oneonta. And other than that, videos, they do okay. At least on Instagram, photos are still where it's at. Facebook, that's a different story. Videos are still performing pretty well.
And maybe and Alice, do you have any, just because you're there, I want to keep giving you space.
Oh, thank you. I would just say hashtags are still important too. If you want to get the attention of John Mayer, for example, maybe a hashtag, something that would get the attention of his social media or communications team. Maybe send him an @ I don't even know his handle, I'm embarrassed to say, but @ John Mayer might tag him in the post. And think about who you want to connect with if you're looking to grow your audience. If it's Twitter that you're using, go through the section that says people who you might want to follow and see who those folks are. See if when you click follow, if they follow you back. One thing that I struggle with is whether or not for my personal Twitter to be public or private. And I've toggled between both functions for years now. And right now my Twitter profile is open to the public. So in that sense, if I request, say, Rob to be my Twitter friend and he follows me back, we can DM each other. But I don't think that function is open if you're private on Twitter. And then if you're private on Twitter, people can't see your profile. So my first tip would be, if you want to grow your followers, make yourself public and make sure you're liking things that would get the attention of the audiences you want to follow, retweet the relevant posts, but then also keep in mind whatever you like, people can see. It gets the cast of The Bachelor and Bachelorette in trouble all the time because people go back through their social media timelines and they see that they liked racist tweets from 10 years ago. So you just have to be really, really, really careful about what you're hearting, so to speak. What's funny now is not going to be funny even tomorrow in this day and age.
Right on. Thank you.
Which is why I would actually suggest making a business account or a second account for the brand that you want to use or represent. Because my personal account, I was going back and forth between private, public, private, public. It's private. Whoever's on there is on there. I can kick people off later. But my private Facebook, I don't have like an ego. Oh, I need to have 2 million followers on my personal. That's one thing. I'm not a public persona. But my business account, yeah, we definitely want growth, and everything there is public. But I won't go like personal stuff with my business account. And that's one way to segment your personal from professional, because employers, unless they're really fancy and they work in law enforcement, are usually not going to have access to your private stuff. But if you want to showcase who you are professionally and what you're working on and what's important to you, do a business account or do a second Instagram account that's for that purpose. That way you can have your personal stuff private and put the stuff out you know is going to be seen by a lot of people, and it's okay.
All right, well, thank you. I guess I won't talk about my nefarious burner account, but that's beside the point. So, hey, I want to reach out to audience members and see if they might have some questions for our panelists. Any questions out there before we ask some more? But we know you must have something on your minds. No pressure. We got another question. If you have something hopping, let us know. What you got, sister?
So what we were just talking about puts me in mind of what can happen when we do post something that might be slightly or even immensely controversial, and we get some pushback, or perhaps it's trolls. You know, you posted a picture of you eating a beautiful bagel sandwich and somebody's anti-carbs, and how do you bounce back from some negative attention on whatever social media platform? Because even TikTok, I've seen negative comments in the comments section. So how do you bounce back, or do you fight back, or do you just go, I'm done, and throw up my hands?
Okay with me dipping into
I don't
this,
care who
please?
starts.
Yeah, you can, sure. I would just say, can I just?
Oh yeah, totally.
Before I forget,
Yeah, this.
I think don't fight back, don't be defensive. I think that ends up looking worse than if you just kind of accept what's happening. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Kyle, what?
I'm going to speak to the Oneana perspective, but also there is a difference between discrimination and hate speech and people who disagree with you. And that's where someone like you is managing what's that fine line. Studies have shown overwhelmingly that with, Amazon accounts or business accounts on Google or whatever, 5 stars by by people who review you is not necessarily a good thing. 4.8 is great, especially if you have a lot, because that shows that there's real people. And the other thing is, if I ever get a negative comment, I address it directly, very professionally, because I want to fix it. I go from the perspective that we did something wrong. Even if I didn't publicly, I'm going to admit, I'm going to take responsibility for it, I'm going to try to solve it, because then future customers, or if you're engaging on social media, future followers are going to go, oh, I trust this person, or they really do care, but they do want real feedback, and I feel safe enough to put that out there, and people will listen to it. And so that's the fine line, whether it's on your business accounts or your personal social media. With the college, my company did their first virtual commencement, and so we managed all of the creation of all the things and getting all the photos in there. And even though it wasn't my decision, I was pushing very, very hard for them to allow people to comment about the negative experience they have and not delete them off of the social media channel in real time, because that looks like censorship.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, you have students who didn't get to go to commencement. Of course some of them are going to be mad. If somebody says, I'm so mad I couldn't be there in person, and that's okay. If somebody says, they start swearing and going off, that's a different story. So that's, I think, a really important distinction.
For sure. Like, we never want to censor anyone. That's not a good look. On the college's accounts, we only have filters for inappropriate language, that type of thing. And so, yeah, everything Kyle said, I agree with.
There's good and bad. You can't just showcase the good. You can put out all the good you
Yeah.
want, but if somebody doesn't like it, that's where you got to put the hat on and ride that line between what's working against you and what's hateful speech or bullying or any of that.
And from a business perspective, address the negative feedback in the form the negative feedback is given in.
Yeah.
If somebody comments on a post you post on Facebook, a complaint, respond by commenting back. Don't screenshot it and repost something else for everyone else to see, or don't say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did this really offensive thing. I'm going to send out a press statement to the media, because that will amplify the issue. Always address the issue in the format it is presented in.
Super important.
Mhm. Thank you. I'm going to turn back here. Questions?
There's one in the middle. You're looking at others. You have a question.
I didn't know if they did. Well, being in college student, I'm a junior here, and I want to open my own business, a baking business, like someday when I get out of school. And I didn't know if you guys had any tips to like start that kind of business, Instagram, if you will, or when I should start looking into that kind of thing.
Okay, so my aunt lives in Oneonta. My family's from this area. She used to work at Mead West Vaco, 5-star products, all that stuff. She was there like a senior art director for them. When the paper product industry started transitioning to digital to the point where people were losing their jobs, she lost her job. She transitioned to real estate because she's very good with people. She is an amazing baker. All she did, her cookies, she's like an artist on cookies. Bootsy Burnside, or Aunt Bootsy, she's on Instagram, you check her out. Her cookies are literally art, and I'm not just saying that because she's my aunt. And all she did was bake stuff and shared photos of it. She knew how to make it get lit just well enough and all of that, so you'll have to figure out some of those techniques so it doesn't look bland. But it doesn't cost nearly anything except for your baking ingredients and time. Just do it. Just do it.
Start now.
Start building your brand now, so when you do want to start a business, you don't have to rush and create all this stuff and put content out there. Start making stuff now. If you do it once a month, even if you do it once a year, start taking photos of your stuff, practice. Yeah, and you can change your business name later. You can figure that out later.
And we're so lucky, right, to have phones now that take such amazing photos. Half of the time, I just use my phone to take the pictures that end up on the college's website, or unless it's like a very special event, I just use my iPhone. So, like, yeah, just start taking pictures, start now.
And tap the talents of your peers. If you have a vision for a logo in your mind or a catchy name, treat your peers and your roommates and your friends as your focus group. And maybe one of them wants to design a logo if they happen to be a graphics design major. And then you can create a logo for cheap or free.
And then you can create a cookie or a cake with that logo on it. That's some more content that's free. But those friends, if you don't have a lot of money or resources, trade them some cookies for their time. Give them some social media shout outs. Like, they've got a business too.
I'm glad you brought it up. In fact, this logo here, 3 Things I Learned, was created by Carla Dudala, a student, and I loved it. So there are a lot of talented peers out there to bring into your fold to help you create the branding that you're looking for. So cool thoughts, everybody. Thank you. Is there one final question in the audience before we go to speed round? Ooh. This is where we need sound effects like da-da. But we don't have any of those. We're no frills here. So, any final questions from the audience here? Just no pressure. Just checking in. Thank you very much. All right. Well, 2 weeks from tonight, we get joined by 2 alums. That's Daniel Stalter and Stefan Graphite, he's known as, with Owen Conklin from Admissions, as we tackle 3 things I learned from comics, not comedians. So I'm dealing with comic books and comic book characters and graphic novels.
Interesting.
So they're going to join us in studio on September 30th at 7 p.m. Today's program is a lead credit for media literacy, so y'all will get that. But as we go into the speed round, this is the final question of the night for which everyone up here on this panel gets to participate. Very excited about this. So our speed round question for tonight is, what is your favorite account to follow on what platform? What is your favorite account to follow, and on what platform? We'll begin with Kyle.
Lizzo on Instagram.
Boom.
Wendy's on Twitter. That was mine. They're so funny.
Oh my God, yes.
Any type of Instagram account that has quotes attached to it. Sweatpants and coffee is a good one.
Oh, I'm gonna look.
Sweatpants and coffee. I like it. What do you got?
Nerdist on Twitter.
Nerdist. All right, I like that.
Good
Two of
one.
my favorites on Twitter are Super 70 Sports. I think it's a hoot, little body, but it's good natured. And I like Susie Dent for word of the day. What is she? She's a British woman, English woman who has just a wonderful gift of language and shares a little word of the day. So check that out if you can. Well, on behalf of my friends Alice, Jessica, and Kyle, I'm Rob Tebow with Dr. Monica Grau, and we thank you for joining us tonight. We hope to see you in 2 weeks. Good night, everybody.
God.